Hey guys, welcome back to the Kampai Sugai podcast. My name's Gavin, and I have a special guest with me today, a veteran, someone who born and raised here, local boy, but he is running for House of Rep, District 49.
Yep.
You're a candidate for it, and yeah, please give a round of applause for Mr. Shawn Richey.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. Appreciate the offer to come on.
Of course, yeah. You've been doing a lot of Zoom interviews I've seen, but this one's in person, so it's good to have you here. Actually, you're a lot taller. We were just talking about this, but you're actually a lot taller than I thought. Which I was thinking you have the body type to be like maybe around my height, but I didn't realize you taller than me. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird when I knock on people's doors. I'm going door to door now,
Mm.
and like they'll come out and they'll look up and they'll be just like, "Whoa!" And I think the last thing they would expect is for me to be a politician there to like,
Mm.
"Hey, I'm here to work for you." Like,
Mhm.
how can I help you? And they're just like, "Whoa."
Yeah, they just see this Viking at the door, and they're like, "Is it Thor? Is Thor coming to our house
Yeah.
today?" You know?
And nobody's asked door to door about the beard yet.
Mm.
Some of these interviews people ask, but nobody like just in the community asks.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're like that's just his thing or it's
Mm.
just kind of weird to ask about those. But no one said anything yet.
Actually, that's a good point because there's a lot of clean shaven politicians, but actually I think the beard's a good it's a good natural look. I think for it's more relatable too, I mean and in terms of like the clean cut politicians, we should kind of veer away from that because we get too many of those these days. We need people that are just for the community or who've been here their whole life and someone like yourself. So thank you for coming on the show today, dude.
Absolutely. I often say I'm here. I'm not here to look good. I'm here to do good.
Mm.
And so I feel like there has been this trend of almost celebrity politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you present yourself as a celebrity, then you worry more about your status and you're not going to have the real conversations and do the hard work that's needed to be a public servant, especially in a time where I hope we can all agree that, we can do better and there needs to be some changes.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And you've been grinding it out much better than I think some politicians because I feel like some maybe they just go for door to door for just to get someone's vote and then when they get in the office then they just disappear. We never see them again. But you're a guy putting in the work. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a bit. Let's talk about what school did you grad to? Where did you grow up and before you became a candidate here?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Aiea in Halava Heights.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Webbling Elementary, then it's kind of a feeder school for Moanaloa Middle,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up graduating from Moanaloa High School.
Nice. Did you play any sports in school?
I did. I always credit sports as the driving factor to get me through kind of my high school days.
Mm-hmm.
So my main sport was basketball. I also played volleyball and football.
What sport was your favorite one, and then like the position you played?
Basketball, and it's always funny because I'm 6'3", and so in
Mhm.
Hawaii that's like you're like a bulldog center,
Yeah.
and then like in the mainland or anywhere else that's like a point guard,
Yeah.
right? So I think it did me a disservice in the long
Mm.
run, but I played a lot of forward, a
Mm.
lot of center, which helped me with my footwork, but again, there's when you're pegged into that in Hawaii, there's no real path to any
Mhm.
sort of college ball or anything like that.
Yeah. That's like Chris Paul, for instance. I mean, he looks short on TV, but that's because he's among all these other giants. But in person, it's different because like I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, you're kind of the same size as me, or even taller. So if I was on those NBA courts, I'd probably look like a midget.
You'd have to be a point guard.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I had to be a point guard. So, yeah, that's awesome. Basketball was your go-to. How many years did you play basketball?
So I played basketball from like probably 12 years old, maybe 13. I had like a growth spurt because I was kind of, a goofier as a kid. And then when I
Mm.
finally kind of grew to that height, One of my friends introduced me to basketball, and I actually credit that for a lot of my commitment to service that I do.
Mm-hmm.
He invited me from Moalo Middle to go and play basketball in Kalihi at Lanakila Gym.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone else that was on our team was, in the housing around that area, KPT, things like that. And I would take the bus over to go and play basketball there.
Yeah, yeah.
And the coach that we had was just amazing and really, taught me a lot about how to invest in people, how to be selfless in building people up, and meanwhile taught not just basketball as a skill, but also taught us how to be better men and how to be men in a lot of ways. So uh, basketball is always going to be near and dear to me.
That's awesome. And what'd you do after high school? You went to the military. I kind of touched upon that a little bit, but yeah, tell us
Yeah.
about that.
So I think, there's a statistic out that like 50% of local people from Hawaii don't go to college after high school. So there's about half do, half don't.
Mm-hmm.
I was in that half that didn't. Just it wasn't a priority for me. I didn't really have a ton of direction. I honestly just felt like I needed to take a break from Hawaii for a second, just get some worldly experience. I'd kind of like that section of my life I was ready to kind of, I don't know, evolve from, walk away from, whatever you want to call it. So ended up in Oregon, which is where my like paternal side of the family is from. They actually have like a Oregon Trail homestead style property.
Okay.
And so a lot of history there. But I went and I like worked on a farm. And like I'm a city boy from Oahu and like on a farm, and I always just remember we were baling hay and I lift up and there was a red snake and I like screamed and I chucked the bale and everyone was laughing because it was just a garden snake. But growing up here, you don't know that.
Yeah, we don't have that here.
You know snakes.
Yeah.
So was kind of in this, like, I knew that wasn't the life for me, but I really didn't have a path. And so cliche, I got recruited out of a Starbucks
Really?
to join the army.
Okay.
And so it was like, we'll pay for your school, and it was like a $30,000 bonus. So as a broke kid, with
Yeah, 30
few
grand's a lot.
prospects.
Yeah.
And it was perfect timing because I joined in 08. So like I graduated in 08 and I joined the military in 08. And literally as I'm in basic training, the economy crashes, right? The housing crash happens. And so I got that $30,000 bonus. And by the time I left basic and AIT, they got rid of all the bonuses and they were raising standards because so many people were flocking to the military.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you got in right before that big market crash or that recession.
That was happening as I was there, so I really didn't see it because I was crawling around in the dirt and doing a lot of push-ups and all that,
Yeah, definitely. So were you able to go to college after maybe your time in service?
Yes, but I guess when you're that young, you don't read the fine print as well. So part of the reason why I got the $30,000 bonus was there was a clause that I was going to go right overseas. So as soon as I was done with basic and AIT, I came home and I was like, you got 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, 2 weeks for what? And they're like, yeah, you're going overseas. So I was 19 years old in Iraq.
Wow.
Spent a lot of time in country, a lot of experiences. A lot of them I didn't really at the time I think know how to process. But I'm a consummate learner. I'm very good at adapting and addressing those kind of things. But yeah, it was a lot I think for any 19-year-old. But after I was done, I came back. Turned 21. I think it felt a little bit more anxious to go to school.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like threw myself into school. I was able to pay my way to get a marketing and advertising degree. And it was mostly in like account management. Like how can I take somebody's passion? How can I take somebody's business and everything they've been through and work with creative, work with media teams to tell that story in a kind of a funnel to help, increase sales or anything like that. So a very applicable, I think, thought process
Mm-hmm.
and way to address problems and conversations and
Mm-hmm.
things that could use some help.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess you're using a lot of those skills or the things you've learned in college, even in the military. You're using it now to really um, help your campaign out. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about that. So why did you you can drink some water? I know he's
Sure,
reaching
sure.
for it,
I was.
but yeah, why are you running for government? I mean, there, as you can see, there's a lot of candidates for every single district. I mean, there's a big influx of people that wanna change Hawaii
Right.
to be better because it should go in that direction. Right now, even for myself, I feel like it's declining, and um, housing situations or even just society situations. There's a lot of violence these days.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, tell us why you're running for government, dude.
Yeah, first and foremost, I wasn't planning to now, and I think a lot of these people weren't necessarily planning to do this. I think that this is a call from people who have, roots in the culture, roots in this place
Mm-hmm.
to say, hey, we're getting off track, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
all the things that we love about it are becoming much harder to maintain, much harder to embrace just because of that direction, the cost of living, all
Mm-hmm.
these things. And so for me, after I finished college and I moved back, there wasn't a lot of marketing experience. So my actual like first experience here was working at legislature
Mm.
and working in legislative session. And I think that that's a great experience for any young person to kind of, be able to kind of look behind the scenes
Mm-hmm.
and see how politics really moves.
Mm.
And I think for me at that point, it was like, okay, I understand now what this is, and it's just not really for me, right? I want to
Mm-hmm.
help. I've always been a public servant. I like to say that my passion is in supporting others, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
one of those people who is like, your success is my success, right? Like, I don't, it doesn't have to be about me in order for me to get that accomplishment as long as I'm helping and investing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of got turned off from politics and I jumped into state government. So I've been doing contracts, so acquisitions and contracts, how we
Mm.
spend taxpayer
Oh,
dollars for the
procurement.
government procurement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I was a procurement specialist, and then I was a purchasing manager for the University of Hawaii, and that was my experience,
Hmm.
heading into this. And again, I think it entails a lot of those skills that I had picked up along the way. And I was planning on doing that for the next 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I wasn't planning on stepping out now to come and do this.
Mm-hmm.
But to get right to the point of why I'm doing it, I think we all, elephant in the room, right? The pandemic, the lockdowns of the last few years
Mm.
have precipitated the largest wealth transfer in human history.
Mm.
And when you take a look back at where that wealth went, it didn't go to the people, it didn't
Mm.
go to the middle
Mm-hmm.
class, it went somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And here locally, I've had friends who've lost their businesses. I've had friends who worked very hard to afford their first properties, their
Mm-hmm.
investment properties, and all of the renters got a rental reprieve, but the banks never gave owners a bill reprieve. So
Mm.
now they're not getting their rent. They still owe for their house. And two of my friends had to sell their properties
Mm.
because of that. And then any of the livelihoods, any of those things because of, I'll just say it, overreach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because again, we want to be supported by our government. It's supposed to be a
Yeah.
partnership for that progress. And I feel like that partnership is a little one-sided, and I feel
Mm.
like that's why you're seeing people, regular people stepping up, is
Mm.
because that's the balance that's needed right now,
Mm.
is
Mm-hmm.
to bring that voice of the people to be in alignment and balance with the voice of the government and all the politics that happens in the capital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's not a lot of meeting us halfway kind of thing. They'll say maybe, um, like, yeah, we're here for you guys. That's awesome. It's all, what was that, talk service or whatever, or, just for status wise. But yeah, even for me, I don't feel like a lot of what's going on here is being maybe they'll say one thing, it's being communicated one things, but it's not being done to that extent.
Especially right now, right during election season.
Yeah.
That's the season to just like make promises and say all these things you're gonna do. And even in this moment, I feel like part of the reason why I'm having success is because I will go and talk about these uncomfortable things. And the last few years have gotten me to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that if we're going to do that realignment, if we're going to make this change, we're going to have to a certain extent, embrace the uncomfortableness of that shift back. And that's what I don't know people are ready for or want to do, but you'll never know if you don't try, right? And so this is why there's so many people who I think are stepping up and saying, you know what, I'll give it a try, right?
Yeah.
And I give them credit. I was at an event last night. It was a Get Out the Vote event. It was a free Capenna concert, up at PCC on the North Shore. Yeah. And hardly anybody came out. And,
really?
Kai Kahele was there, BJ Penn was there, a bunch of candidates, and it's just like, I feel like because of what's going on and because it's uncomfortable, most people are just like, I don't want to deal with it. Right? It's the first summer where there's not as many restrictions. I just want to enjoy. I don't really want to think about it. And I really am trying to be as respectful as I can in that. And so as I go around and I meet with people, I always, make sure that first, I look them in the eye, I ask their name, I shake their hand if I can, and then I wish them a wonderful summer. And I just hope that this fall we're ready for some change. And, I think that people kind of have different connotations of that because it's like, yeah, we want change, but not too much change. And I think that's why I'm a great candidate for right now, because I will do those. I will lean into that change again to put people first. But I understand the government here. I understand the politics here. I kind of understand those mechanisms and how to make that shift in a respectful way. And so I'm running.
Oh, it's a good. I think one thing which I'll touch upon is maybe we've lived in a way where I guess some people got too comfortable, and then maybe they didn't see the changes that were happening, and then they got complacent. Then they're like, oh, we'll just vote any kind, name recognition or status wise, not focusing on the real rules or laws that have been passed or not have been passed, because, yeah, you look around. I mean, I was touching upon it earlier, but housing situations, people for local families, it's becoming really hard to just buy a house. Like, I mean, my wife and I, we don't really know where we want to live because I would say we have the money to do it. But the thing is, the housing situations don't look good enough to be like, yeah, we should buy this, and then like, okay, we'll maybe we'll be screwed for a little while. But that's just one problem. There's a lot more problems too. There's COVID restrictions. People have been complaining about that. Letting Hawaii open. Don't let Hawaii open. Over tourism. There's a ton of problems these days, and I don't feel like the leadership we have now is addressing it correctly.
I would have to agree. And I think, when I listen to that and what I hear come up a lot, and I think is, really kind of stirred up in Hawaii a lot, is this idea of sovereignty, right? And however you want to take that sovereignty, right, where there's people who are sovereignty for the kingdom, people who are sovereignty for their bodies, people who are sovereignty for their families. And I think that, that is at the center of Hawaii, right? There's a lot of weird kind of contradictions in Hawaii that makes it so wonderful, and another reason why you can't have one size fits all policies.
Yeah.
But one is, we have very strong family values. Like, family is so important here. And so I think that, that kind of family sovereignty issue is where I saw the most the most concerned when it was like now the government is coming into that. And I use family, for our, blood family, but also for like businesses, right? I was one of the people who got to testify for the passport bill. And I just, I always start by listening. And there were so many businesses who were like, we know our customers. We know our business. We already have policies in place to take care of them. Please allow us to take care of our family. Please allow us to have the flexibility and then let the market dictate, right? If people don't feel comfortable, they will leave and we will adapt because we want to keep our businesses going. And I think that, that's one of those very kind of like, clear moments for me where it was like, okay, 6,000 people came out in opposition of that. Like, I've worked in government a long time. Getting 6,000 people to do anything is crazy here. And then for that to happen and them just say, sorry, we've already made up our mind. We're doing it. Those are the things that I think are, again, calling for, okay, who is going to listen to me? Who is going to champion for my voice? And not only that, but give a safe place to have that conversation because we all grow up knowing or being told you don't talk about religion and you don't talk about politics. And I think that not being able to talk about politics has now created this very big divide now that politics is in almost everything we do. And so it's like it's in everything, it's touching everything, but we don't know how to talk about it. And I think that that's why there's some friction in what's going on now is just because of that lack of, kind of language understanding for politics.
Yeah. And then speaking of, like, just to build off of that, even I used to work at Winter Community College as an audiovisual technician, so I know a lot about the procurement process. And even there, I mean, I've never seen a university that was governed kind of by the state in order to get like certain funding and everything. Because I would sit in the Board of Regents meeting and we would get funding for certain things, be sports or certain departments and everything. And they have this term, and I don't work there anymore, which is good, so that I can say this. They have this term called working the system, and that's something that if you think about it now, it's pretty corrupt in a way because it's like, okay, working the system. Why do we need to work the system? Right? Shouldn't we just do things that are right instead, correct and pono? Why are we having to work within the government system in order to get things we want to, get done, or people have their own agendas as well. So there's that thing. People are listening now. They're probably thinking like, oh, now we're gonna watch out for when people say work the system. They're gonna know, hey, maybe they're in government, government positions and stuff like that. And that's a thing. That's a thing that happens.
And I think it's the immediate question is, why isn't the system working for us? Right? Why do we, in order to get these things done, have to go outside of the box? And a recent experience is going door to door. I was asking everyone's concerns. It's on our link in bio page, the kind of the top 5 concerns I found. And one of them was the overgrown streams across the windward side and in Kaneohe. And many of them not cut for 2.5 years. We're heading into a storm season. I'd knock on doors and they'd say, come look at this. And they would just show it to me. And they didn't have to say anything else because there's whole trees rooted in the middle, that are, taller than me, way taller than me.
Yeah.
And so it's a concern. And so I was like, okay, let's go and reach out. And I see the schedule and, it's not really going to work to get them there because there's one piece of equipment for the entire island of Oahu that does the type of cleaning that's needed in these streams. So off the bat, that makes no sense. Why is there one piece of equipment for the entire island?
Yeah.
At a minimum, it should be like per region, and the windward side should have one piece of equipment or, something like that. And then I go and I reach out to my communities, and I have people who are willing to donate, mini excavators that could help to move the stuff, cranes to help lift it out, and then, dump trucks and stuff like that. So I'm putting all of these pieces together. I finally meet with the city, and they say, community can't do anything, right? Not only can the community not do anything, but there's no vendors that can do anything either.
Oh.
So
Okay.
per the regulations and the red tape, the only people that can take any motorized equipment, including a lawnmower, into these places are a small team of city-trained individuals. And they're the only ones. And so immediately it's like, wait a second, right? Why doesn't this system work for us?
Yeah.
Why do we have to work the system, right? And, you could go and do it on your own, but, you'd be outside of the rules, right? And, and that's what a lot of, landowners and stuff do just because they can't wait that time. But why doesn't the system work for us? And why, at a minimum, aren't they allowing the market to participate? You can have all the red tape, and if there's a need, the market will meet it. And they don't even allow that.
And then just support the market. You know what I mean?
And then just support the market.
Exactly.
And then you can have a balance between the community and the community's needs and the government and the bureaucracy and the slow pace at which government inherently moves. And I think that's what you hit on, is because government moves so slow, for a lot of these agencies, it's like, no, I need this now, right? And then you're looking at the process, and it's like, I gotta wait 10 days.
Impossible.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
So then you have to get creative and game the system in order to meet those timelines.
Yeah.
And the number one problem that I found working, in contracts for the last, 7-8 years was planning is a dirty word for the government. Like, there is so little planning that goes into these things. And when you have these slow systems, you almost need to have that planning component so that you can stay ahead of the wheels that are turning super slow.
Yeah.
But when you have no planning and it moves super slow, that's why there's so many problems. And that's kind of the way it always was. And I think I got used to that. And I think part of the reason why I'm concerned now and stepping up the way I am is because during the pandemic, we saw the government move faster than I've ever seen it move in my life. And it was terrifying because it's not meant to go that fast. So here it is. Now it's sprinting, and all the people who are used to the slow crawl, they can't keep up. And so, those are the kind of concerning issues that are going on. And again, if you can maintain that, if you can build that, that's fine. And then we can have some progress.
Yeah.
But it really didn't seem that way. It seemed like a runaway train in a lot of ways. And I think that those effects of having it move that way are, again, why people are raising their hands and saying, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a firefighter, but I want to step up and run for my community, right? Not because I have all the answers, but because I'll ask the right questions, and I will listen, and I will make sure that, again, it's moving in a direction that is dictated by the will of the people. And that's what it's supposed to be about.
And I think a part of I touched upon it earlier, but it's kind of that complacent society where it's like nothing's going on or nothing wrong is happening. So we're just gonna let it ride out the way it is. And then when something turns up, like COVID, when something turns up, then we'll start moving, right? But there's no planning involved with it. Even with COVID, I don't feel like a lot of. I mean, there was time to plan. You know what I mean? We learned about this, November 2021. Or I'm sorry, not 2021, 2019. And from there, we had so many months before March to actually plan and find ways to, prepare for this pandemic or whatever, right? But then I don't think there was enough systems in place or enough planning in place to even, tackle this issue until it actually happened. You know what I mean?
I would agree, and I always make sure that I say how proud I am of Hawaii and being from Hawaii, how we responded at the beginning of the pandemic. And you're right, we didn't do the planning, but when it did come here, I felt like we did what we needed to do because it was an unknown, right? We don't know what it's going to do, so we all did what we had to do. And yes, it was uncomfortable, but we put people first and we made the changes that we had to. Teleworking, you know what I mean? Staying home,
staying
all
home.
of these things. So I was so proud when that happened. But then to continue your point, even after that, even after we made that monumental move, there was no planning. And then we were heading into the second year, and it's like they're still figuring it out. And it's like, no, you know, like you've had all of this time, you've had all of these things, and then why I'm running and why I, you know, why part of my campaign is putting people first is because the second half, this transition back, doesn't have people first. There's something else driving it, but it's not people. Right? Because again, if you were listening to people, if you were, you know, doing that, then I think the majority of people would not have chosen this path. And again, we elected the officials that are there right now prior to this all happening, right? So we didn't elect them to lead in a crisis. We elected them to lead in our complacency of, you know, it's just the way it is, that's okay.
More like managers. They're just managing problems that are happening now, but they're not doers. They're just managers.
I could see a lot of that, right? And so now that we're in this stage, I think that's why there's such a push for, you know, we need to get new blood. We need to, you know, the incumbents, right, sat by, or, you know, and I'm not trying to, it's an unprecedented thing that they were going through, and all of that. But at the end of the day, why I'm running is because we have to put people first again in order to kind of fix some of these issues. And then secondly, to address the kind of complacency, if you will. Like that's a big thing to me. Hawaii always has like the highest voter apathy. There's always this culture of like, don't make waves, you know, don't cause trouble. It is the way it is, you know, all of these things that we've been told for our whole lives. And now we need to plant a new idea, right? And so my campaign slogan is also the idea that I'm trying to get out there, which is we can do better, right? Whatever's happening, just we can do better, right? And then you can say, well, how do you do better? Well, you put people first. And if we can plant an idea that is going to get us from that complacency, right, into action, even if it's moving super duper slow, because I think that's the pace that Hawaii is comfortable with, at least we're then heading in the right direction.
Yeah, we need to head in some direction that's away from our trajectory right now.
Right.
Definitely. So let's talk about some of the issues in Kaneohe. What do you think are the top issues that we face as people that live here in Kaneohe or even on the windward side in general?
So I think that there's a lot of kind of these basic concerns. Again, I have my top 5 that's out there, but when I listen to a lot of these complaints and I let them know that I'm their representative, it becomes very clear that they have no idea what that means, right? They have no idea what the role of a lawmaker is and what the role in politics are. And so when I really think about it, there has to be this educational component. And again, you know, it's hard to talk about politics. So the number one concern I see is how can I meet people where they're at, right? In a non-confrontational, you know what I mean? Like where they don't even know, but necessarily that they're learning about these structures. How can I go and provide that baseline? Because there's 2 real issues that I'm seeing right now. And one is that, you know, kind of the government has separated itself from the people, and that the people have not elevated themselves to meet the government, right? So I think that in order for us to kind of make this change, it has to be both. And that's why I broke down my campaign into 2 sections. One is we can, and then the other is do better. So the we can is investing in our communities. These are the things that I would do in office that doesn't require, you know, it's just a platform for me, but it doesn't require legislature or anything like that. And it's investing in, you know, the best people on Oahu in Kaneohe, investing in them around the things that they're already doing. And so part of the reason why I'm going on these podcasts and reaching out to you is that's the most important to me, is local independent media. Because if we don't start to share our successes, if we don't start to know the successes in our community in a real way, it becomes a lot harder to, feel like you want to jump in and help too. So there's media independence, food independence, again, getting connected to our farmers, getting connected to where our food is coming from. And then another one is political independence. And again, that's the one that I want to help out with, is how can I make it easy for you to share your voice? How can I get some sort of, some mechanism in place where during session, during when we're going, I can reach out to the people and it's easy for them to share their voice in a way that doesn't disrupt their lives. They don't have to go to the Capitol. They don't have to, do all of these crazy things. And I can still make sure that I'm staying in touch with them. Community independence, which is not just like where we live, which is awesome, but there's awesome biking communities. There's awesome, there's so many wonderful communities here on the Windward side, and I want to invest and lift them up. Wellness, so medical independence, nutritional, fitness, any of those, martial arts, all of those kind of things, all important communities that we need to start elevating and bringing up. And then finally, like financial independence, all of the small businesses, that's always going to be a big thing for me. So I think building the networks, building the connection, building the, the kind of larger communities on top of what we're doing to elevate the people up to a point where, we know now what everyone is doing and how to communicate that to the government.
Right.
And then the other half is do better, which is, again, how do we do better? We put people first, which is naturally going to kind of pull that back down. And so the hope is, if we learn to communicate these things, we start to care about it even just a little bit while it's getting pulled down, then we can bring it back together. And I think that's all it's really going to take, is I think we have such good people, we have such good culture, we have such good morals here, that once we're back in alignment, I think things will naturally start to gel a lot better. And then once we have that, then we can go to like the real, kind of bigger issues, right? What are we going to do with this rail? How are we going to make sure that Red Hill stuff never happens again? How are we going to address the fallout of the restrictions and the things that were, shut down and kind of set back during this? But I think it's going to be really, really hard to have those conversations while the two are disconnected.
So I agree. We need to get that connection back in place between the people and the government, because the people is what makes the government. That's the only way the government's formed, is through people, the people here. So that's why it's important for people to vote. If you're listening, please vote.
Please.
I mean, it's so important these days. Even now, I mean, when I was doing a podcast for the mayor candidates. I think it must have been 2 years ago. Oh, it feels fast. I haven't done that for a while, but yeah, 2 years ago. There was a disconnect because, of course, there was COVID. COVID just started. And then from there, there was no shift in like, how do we connect people to the government, because they wanted social distancing, they wanted certain things. So,
right.
But now we have that. We are kind of back in that society where there's that connection. We can have the connection again. There wasn't candidates that were going door to door like they were before, back when COVID happened, and then they had the election there. But then now we have that connection where guys like yourself can go out and listen to the people and listen to what they see in their communities. Because, I mean, honestly, it's not like you can be everywhere at once. So you can't know every single issue unless you were there or people told you exactly like what's going on in their community, on their street or whatever,
And I try to be as purposeful as I can with like commitments I'm making. I think we talked before about it's election season, and people say a lot of things. I'm very purposeful in my commitments, but one that I am dedicated to is, if I do get into office, I want to raise up people from our communities to run against me. Right? I think that we need to instill that pride of raising people up from the community to lead the communities.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wish that there was a lot more people running against me this year. And again, I'm one of those people where I'm pro maximum competition. And I think that we should get the best people out there, fighting for their communities, fighting for their causes, and then we collectively let the people decide. And I don't know why that is. So that's another thing that I look to do is, again, their successes become my successes. I want to give them a platform. I want to raise them up to be my community liaison for their community, right? And then they can, be there and help with that and help me because I can't be in every place at once, and build them up around that, give them the exposure, give them the education, so that in 2 years, I've groomed someone to run against me. And I'm the type of person that loves that because that's going to keep me sharper. And that's going to make the community sharper because now we're raising
more aware of what's going on.
Yeah,
definitely. I like that approach. It's all about building something better. Every single day, or even now, like we're trying to achieve a goal where Hawaii becomes better. So why not come as a community and try to help each other out by doing that? I feel like that's very admirable about raising up people to run against you. I guess if you were to get in office,
yes.
But that's admirable because that means that you're in tune with the community. That means that other person, there'll be a culture of that connection that with the government and the people, and it's not going to be disconnected because who knows, maybe another person that comes into office will want to be doing that same thing. They said, hey, what, Shawn was running his campaign the same way he ran for office. He was in office representing this. I want to be able to be a good representation and someone that can pass on the torch to someone else,
100%.
And the thing is, that's great because it's like, I just thought of this now, but career politicians, right? We have there's this term with career politicians where people just stay in office forever. I have a couple names in mind. I'm not going to say their name, but you know who you are. But they ran for office. They continued on in office for years, and no changes have happened. They've promised a lot of things, but they haven't passed on the torch to other people. And I think in government, it's kind of like a military service where it's just you stay in for your term, and then you pass it on to another person. Hopefully they can take it to another level, right?
And it's you worked at WCC. I'm sure you've seen this. There is a lack of succession planning across the entire state.
Yeah,
people build this knowledge base and build this kind of importance around themselves. And then when they leave this giant void. And then everyone is scrambling to pick it up. And so somebody recently asked me, what is my definition of success? And for me, success is leaving something better than I found it. And so if it's all about me, if I am the success and then I leave, am I leaving it better than I found it? And so that requires us to bring people along for the ride, to lift up everybody in these communities and not make them dependent on me, but again, allow me to be a vehicle to support all of these people. And I think, it's a pretty basic concept, but again, it goes against, and I think this is what you were touching on before, and it's kind of a dirty word, but that good old boy system that was so prevalent in Hawaii for so long. And the way I explain it is it's like lighthouses, right? And so it's these big tower structures of power, and then there's a little room at the top that has the light, and that's where all the decision makers are. That's where all of the power structure is, and that's the only one that communicates to the other light towers. Right? And then if you have to make some change, it's going down and over. So then you hear the cry of all state workers and everything like that. Not my job, too hard. right? Because there's no connection.
Right.
You would have to go and make that connection.
Yeah, it's too hard for them to come down from that lighthouse.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And that's what we need right now. That's what I'm running on in a nutshell, is I think we need to take these and make them into tents, right? So again, just spread it out, make it more horizontal, so that there's a bunch of people with a base of knowledge, so that again, if one person leaves, if one person steps aside, there's other people there who can step in immediately, help out, and again, make access from the bottom, which unfortunately is the people, more accessible. Because if the only way that a person is going to make change is to climb up to the top of the lighthouse, good luck, right? I get it all the time when I'm running. What makes you special? What makes you think you're going to be able to climb all the way up to the top of the lighthouse and change the direction and all that? I don't really think I can. I don't think any of us can. I think it's going to need to be a concerted effort of making sure that we're all bringing the people with us. We're all bringing our communities with us and lifting it up. And that's the only way we're truly going to start the change that's needed. And it needs to be, largely local people. Because again, we grew up in the culture that's here. And I always say it's not that kind of mainland me first culture, and it's not the, Far East super feudal culture. It's kind of a mix, but it's most deeply rooted in the indigenous people, the Kanaka people, who are the most giving. And it's a very respectful community that, again, has a lot of pride, has a lot of those things. And that's why I came home, so my kids could grow up in that. And that's part of the concern as well, is making sure that we are not losing that as we chase or change anything, right?
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about running, because I mean, this is your we'll just say your first campaign,
Yes.
right? What are some things you've kind of learned through your process now?
I've really, and it's, I think, a skill. Either way, when you run like this, you're going to have to stretch yourself. You're going to have to grow. It isn't, again, just inherently an uncomfortable thing. And for me, it really highlights what I would say are some of my weaknesses. And I'm not afraid to say that. I grew up always doing things myself, right? Like, I'm going to outwork people. I'm not going to burden other people with my stuff. I'm just going to work myself to the bone to get it done. And as I'm doing this, you realize that you can't do these things alone. You can't do it with a small team. You have to reach out. And so I've really been growing, and I wish I kind of grew faster in it, of asking people for help. Asking people to help hand out their flyers, asking people to talk to their neighbors, people they already know, and start those things. Instead, it's like, I'm going to take my team and we're going to go to talk to all these communities. But it's so much more successful, even from my marketing background, when you have somebody that when you have somebody that's in your community making that connection, it's already, eightfold. You're going to have a better conversion. And so that's kind of what I'm learning is, I know what to do, but it's also learning how to do it without the money. And that's the elephant in the room. Is I just had a friend who does these sort of campaigns for a living, and he said, for a new campaign to break into the sphere, it's between $30,000 and $50,000.
Jeez.
And I don't have that. And I'm not gonna go to places that I probably could get it, because I haven't done anything yet. So if I am beholden to them before I even got into office, that's not what I want to do either.
Right.
And then I'm going to people, and most people are in the situation like me. They don't have money to give either. So I think that at the end of the day, what are you getting the money for? It's to connect to people. And so that's why these podcasts are important. That's why I try to do the social media stuff. And again, if I can just plant those seeds. And right now, that's all I'm doing is planting seeds, because people are in summer mode. And so I'm hoping that as many seeds as I plant now, when we get into late July, when we get into August, coming out of summer, and people are now thinking about it, and it's in that sphere, they're like, hey, I remember that bearded guy who was out there, saying whatever, or knocked on my door all sweaty because it's hot out now, And that's kind of the hope. but I'm not gonna have that reach if I don't make sure that I am, as much as planning and doing all these things myself, equally humbling myself to ask others to help me to, contribute however they can.
So talking about like door-to-door process, because yeah, it has been really hot. Do you think that going door to door has helped you to kind of understand a little bit more about Kaneohe and the community here?
I do, and there's so many like awesome little like nook and cranny neighborhoods
Yeah.
that, like, living here for the last 7 years, like I've driven by so many times, and I like you never know how far they go. And like so just walking down those neighborhoods again, kind of seeing the different feels, and again, no matter where I go, I love Kaneohe because it's just country enough and it's just city enough, right? It has a great pace to it, and it really does have that deep sense of pride, with Castle being all of this district, and
Yeah,
a lot of people being born and raised here the whole time. There is this sense of pride that I see everywhere I go. And that's also what I'm up against, right? Is like it's always funny because I can't change the way I look, right?
Yeah.
And so and I'm trying to get better at like the TikTok videos, because that's like the one thing that's kind of a little bit beyond me. But I want to do one where it's just like, I remember this conversation vividly of I'm talking to this lady and she goes, "So where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm from Aiea," and then I went into my little speech, and then she goes, "No, where are you from originally?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I was born in Aiea." And then I went back to talking, and then at the end she goes, "Are you sure you're from here?" And it was just like, did anything I say the whole time sink in?
Yeah.
Or was the whole time were you trying to figure out, am I from here and are my intentions real? And I think that's honestly, a very Hawaii thing, and something that I think is valid, but it's hard for me going door to door. And what I mean is, there's like, if you're an outsider, even if you're in surf culture, if you've been in, those kind of tight knit communities, if an outsider comes, somebody's going to challenge them, right? And they're not challenging them because they want to beat them up. They're challenging them because they want to see what their intentions are. So you step, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And they'll get up in your face.
Yeah.
And they want to see what you're doing. And if you come with real intentions and you let them know, then they will welcome you in like nobody's business. But if you freak out, if you get defensive, if you do that stuff, then they're going to meet you there, and they're going to make sure that you stay out of these communities. So a lot of times that's what I feel going door to door, is there's such this sense of pride, and it's like, who are you?
Yeah.
Why do you want to come in and do this? And it's just like, I wish you could just sit down with me and see, because I this is genuine. This is and my roots are here, and I can do this, but I understand what you're going through. And so, we're still in that seed planting phase, and we're going to have to do a couple more waterings and nurturings before I think the larger community is ready to accept, you know what I mean, me there. I think that's why incumbents do so well, is because they've already been accepted in, and just that process is really hard to accept someone new in.
I think kind of building off of that, like with the complacency part about it, is everybody's kind of used to a certain, I guess, formula for a politician or anything. So like when they see something new come in, new ideas or new new values come in, they're kind of like, their walls or their barriers are kind of up already, because they're just kind of like, wait, what's going on here?
Yes.
What kind of change is this? You know what I mean? Like, do I have to get dressed? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Can I just wear my tank top and shorts?
Right.
And yeah, and then that's the thing. There's a lot of barriers up, and that's because there's been so much disconnect for so many years. So
right.
People they're just kind of confused. Like, what am I? When something new comes in, they're just like, well, what am I gonna do now? You know what I mean?
Yes. And I think you're hitting on the relationship that we have with these things of again, I'm involved in my church, right?
Mhm.
And the church that I'm involved in, I like it because they say it's about the relationship and not the religion.
Mhm.
And I relate to that a lot, especially even in politics.
Mhm.
How many people have a relationship with politics? And how many people is it just a ritual you do every 2 years to go into a
Yeah.
thing and look at a letter at the end of the name and check a box?
Uh-huh.
And so, how do you make it into a relationship,
Mm.
especially when the culture and for so long it has been resistant to that sort of approach?
Mhm.
But that's the encouraging thing, and that's why I'm running now. Is I always tell people, if it wasn't for the last couple of years, I wouldn't run right now.
Mm.
But people are hungry for change.
Mhm.
People are looking for it, and most people I knock on their doors, they're like, "I'm glad you're running. We need new blood."
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I'll look into you, but I'm glad you're running.
Mhm.
And that's the encouraging thing, and that's what just kind of keeps it going. Is for every people who are still kind of that old guard, there's one or two people who are like, yeah, we need to do something.
Mhm.
And you know what I mean, you're not what I had in my head, but you're here at my door, and I appreciate
And
that.
you're here now. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Which is great. That's amazing. And that's the kind of thing we need. We need people that are for these honestly values that we grew up with. They're not anything new, honestly.
Right.
If you grew up here, you would know this is how we live. This is the kind of people we are. So, um, locals,
Yes.
right? But I feel like that mentality has kind of gone away, and they think, oh, it's a new thing. But then when locals see that, then they're like, oh, okay, I think the same way, yeah, because we grew up that way. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
And you and me are, I think, we're the same generation.
Right.
And so, our generation has kind of been told, wait your turn so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And while we're waiting our turn, and some of it's when we're little kids, but we're the generation that had 9/11. We're the generation that
Yep.
had the housing crash. We're the generation that
Now
had the
COVID.
big distress, and now COVID.
Yep.
And so there's so much of our generation that's like, yeah, we understand, wait our turn, but look what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps happening. And so, why can't that older generation step up to support us in making those changes?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm finally kind of starting to see it again in these things of
Mm-hmm.
people who are like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, get in there and, and we'll try and support you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that's the other kind of cultural divide, because the culture of Hawaii is so much respect your elders, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's huge,
Mm-hmm.
and for me that's so much. But at the same point, it's like, respectfully,
Mm-hmm.
now is our time,
Mm-hmm.
right? The future, the technology, all of these things, we know how to speak it, we know how to move it. Let us come and embrace the realities of today, and then lean on you for the experience and the wisdom that you bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can make change, instead of just keeping us kind of off to the side and being like, oh no, it's almost your turn, it's almost your turn. And we're like, hey, how many more of these
Yeah.
big events can we have before
We get in and we can't do
and
anything
we can't
about
do
it.
anything?
Yeah.
Yep.
We're just watching it unfold before our eyes, and then what happens? Yeah, if we wait too long and our time comes, then it's like, oh, we missed the boat already. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then we got to raise up the next generation, but then hopefully we don't tell them, hey, wait for your time to come, right? And they see like 30 different things happen, and they're like, okay, now how do we unfold those 30 things that just occurred? You know?
Right. But I think that I think we are more positioned for that because we haven't had it, right? Because we haven't had it, it's a lot easier for us to give it away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, next generation, you can come with us too, right? Like, turn off your TikTok and come, let's
Yeah.
go do this. You know what I mean? Like, we want that generation to help out too, because as much as it is for us, we're kind of on the border.
Mhm.
They're totally in it, right?
Mhm.
And their whole life there's been these kind of existential fears, and like, why can't we address these fears? And
Mhm.
you know what I mean, like, the world's gonna end in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so I just see so much there, and it's just like, come on, come with us, right? Like, don't listen to them anymore, come with us, and
Yeah.
let's try and do better.
Mhm.
Because I have a 6 and a 5-year-old,
Mhm.
You know, and when we were doing that, people were like, why would you bring them into this world? And I was like, I'm not listening. And now I'm like, oh man, all right, I got to step up and do something, because I did. And, you know, I want to be a success. And like I said before, that's leaving things better for my kids than I found them.
Mhm.
And it's not going to happen on its own.
Yeah,
That's what's become
definitely.
extremely apparent.
And we're at a good time now with our generation. The thing is, like, we have more platforms to have free speech. And thing about, like, back in the day, the news stations, the big, like, KGMB or KITV4 News or Hawaii News Now, that was our news sources or platforms we could see certain politicians. You know what I mean?
Right?
But, like, now we have, like, Spotify, we got YouTube, a lot bigger platforms to where if people like um, I guess free media, it was if it was like accessible to other people,
Right.
right? More accessibility than guys like yourself or other candidates that really local guys that probably grew up and they see the same problems and they're running too.
Yeah.
Now we have a platform to actually go and spread this, and more voices are heard, and that's the beauty of it. It's the beauty of the time now. You
It
know.
is. And you know, you hit on the head exactly. The issue is trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our parents grew up trusting those news stations.
Mm.
Because of what we've lived through, we don't trust them. So we
Mm.
look for intermediaries that we do trust.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times those are personalities. So we
Mm.
look for the YouTube people,
Yeah.
we look for the Spotify people,
Uh-huh.
right? And they become our trusted intermediaries
Mm-hmm.
for these issues. And I think that that is at the core and the heart of what I want to do. Is I want to bring back those trust centers in our community.
Mm.
And we can't have these middlemen that are approved to do that for us.
Yeah.
We need to make our own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to your point, we're at the time now where the technology is there, the platforms are there. We can create those trusted media, mediaries.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not going to be created for us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So we'll start wrapping things up here, and yeah, thank you for your time here.
Course,
I
man.
mean, it's been such a blessing, to have you on, and then for us to talk story about what's been going on in Hawaii and stuff. Um, just kind of as like lasting thoughts, what is some things you want to tell the people about, like, um, you know, change or how what you feel right now about Hawaii?
Um, I think we have to, again, stay rooted in what is Hawaii and what is our culture.
Mm-hmm.
I'll often talk about every culture has a different cadence.
Mm.
So, like, I used to love going to New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And New York is super fast paced, right? I would consider it like a techno beat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could only be there for 2 weeks because my diet would devolve into coffee and bagels,
Uh-huh.
and I would sleep like 3 hours a night, right?
Jeez.
And that was just the pace of the
Mm.
culture there. And when I think of Hawaii, we're on a reggae third beat,
Mm.
right? It's not natural for most other places. So
Mm.
that's why, like, when transplants come in, I think they wait for that regular beat and then they move. And it's like, no, 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 no. You got to wait for the third beat, right? You got to wait for that reggae third beat. So we have to stay true to what we are in this change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a lot of times what I hear is a lot of people, we're the instant satisfaction generation. We want change now.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to remember that it's been 30 years, 20 years of this slow change in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what would happen if we just try to flash it back that way.
Mm.
So when I talk about change, when I come in there with the leadership of change, it's not something that's going to be done overnight. And that's why we have to plant this idea, because, again, that's going to help push us in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then we all have to do our part in the change to, again, I like media. Let me step up and start my own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I grow my own garden already. Let me, teach about what I'm doing with my garden, or find some sort of exchange, or do something like that. Everybody has to contribute to this idea of, I know we can do better, and I know that the change that I want to see is true to the Hawaii that I love.
Mhm.
And if we're all working towards that change in our own little way, and then there's a few, leaders who will step up and tie those things together, I think we can really do something beautiful. So even though all of these things look very dire, I remain optimistic that we're not that far off, right? We're not,
Yeah,
the alignment
definitely.
is not that far,
Uh-huh.
but we're going to have to embrace that change. And so I guess it's just more of a calling, a plea for people, right? Just like own the change,
Mhm.
make it your change. You don't have to submit to my change or anyone else's,
Mhm.
but if we're all committing to change that makes it better, it will get better.
Mhm.
And that's the only way it's gonna happen, in my opinion.
Of course, dude. Yeah, I totally believe that. Yeah, we all have to kind of come together and then understand that there's a goal here. We're all trying to reach, and if we're all reaching for that same goal, then and we become better as individuals too, then we'll reach that goal much faster.
I
Right?
agree, 100%.
Sean, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. How can people get in touch with you and then maybe your website as well?
Absolutely. So try to keep it simple. It's vote Shawn Richey. So at vote Shawn Richey, voteshawnrichey.com, voteshawnrichey@gmail.com. We are looking again for people in the area like who know their community. I will come and walk with you, right? Just say, hey Shawn, I saw the podcast. I'm interested in what you had to say. Will you come and walk my community? I don't want you to feel like you're alone. This is all about building connections. So vote Shawn Richey everywhere you can, and hopefully the yard signs are going to start to pick up, and we'll see them around town.
Right on, dude. Hey, and thank you for deciding to run for government. I mean, I think that's a big step because like there's a lot of I was talking with Andrea Topola,
Mm.
and then one of the things she said, I asked her about running for government is it's hard because it's like giving birth. And the thing is, it's like it's so exciting, but at the same time, it's a struggle because you're waiting all that time to. Okay, when is it gonna happen? Is things gonna come to fruition? And then like with running, it's the same thing. It's like you're giving birth, but to like new ideas, new changes, and then it's a whole different thing when you get into office. You know what I mean? So
Right. It's like a bamboo, right?
yeah,
Where like you water it for years and years, and sometimes a decade before it sprouts.
hmm
But then once it takes, it can grow into something that's amazing. You just have to
definitely
be patient.
consistent. Yeah, and
And
patient.
yeah.
So yeah, let's do a Kampai.
All right.
Shawn, this is to you. This is to what you represent in this committee and your campaign, and good luck to you and what you do in the future.
And to you and your awesome platform as well.
Thank you.
Kampai,
Kampai.
brother.